So hi, everybody. We're just going to give everybody just maybe one more minute to log on. We have Darryl here today giving us a few tips on underwriting and what to expect. So you see here, it says underwriting tips for a great closing experience. And today we have our presenter being Darryl. So you guys are going to get firsthand knowledge from our underwriter. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
So I'm excited. He's taught me a lot, so I'm excited to have him share some pointers. On regards to underwriting and what to expect. I love how he says it. What to inspect to, how do you say it?
Inspect what you expect. I'll get it together, guys.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the biggest thing is, speed, ease, and predictability when submitting your files to underwriting and having a great closing experience. So I'm going to let Darryl take it away.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure being here to have a chance to address all you guys as a group. Before we get started, and I'll probably say it again at the end, one thing I do pride myself on is communication. So, and there's no question too big or too small, and I'm never too busy to work with you to get these loans closed. I have a lot of experience in doing this. I am an MLS as well, so I've originated as well as underwritten, and I've been in the business for over 35 years. So that being said, I want to make sure that I share what I know with you guys, as well as being able to to open the door for any questions and anything that I can do to help. Now, the catchphrase that I like to use is speed, ease, and predictability. One of the main reasons why is because being able to close a loan fast in this market, a competitive market, is always great. That's going to set us above. But making that transaction easy, not just for the borrowers, but for you as the originators, is very important. And the final thing is predictability. I want you guys to predict the process and know what's coming, and then that catchphrase that Hayel was just trying to say, then you can inspect what you expect, meaning you'll know what you're looking at to know what you're trying to get out of it. So I'm gonna try not to read too fast, but if I do, I know that you guys can get a copy of this deck. And if you have any questions along the way, so that we keep it flowing, just write them down, type them out, and then I will definitely do my best to answer them as thoroughly as possible. Okay, so all right, I hit the space bar, so say yes.
And then click on that. Sorry. And there you go.
Okay.
Then it's fine.
Mr. King, you rock. Go ahead.
Here we go. First and foremost, guys, we got to set realistic expectations. Now, in doing so, I want you to keep in mind that, our turn times are usually within 24 hours for initial underwriting and condition review. Those of you who have submitted loans to me, you know that I will turn them around as quickly as possible. You want to factor in setting realistic expectations with your clients, factor in your third-party service turn times as well. You're going to factor in the time for the appraisal, how long it gets to get the title, and making sure that you're looking at that title so you'll be able to predict, any other items that we'll need. And for IRS transcripts, if you have a self-employed borrower, all of our agencies, they do want the tax returns we use to calculate the income to be supported by the transcripts. And then also in doing so, when you're looking at the tax return, when you get it from the borrower, automatically go to the second page of the 1040 to see if the borrower's owed anything. Because if they did, we're going to want proof that that was paid if we're not paying it in our transaction. Contingency release dates. You want to make sure that you factor in that loan complexity, because you know that, a lot of our loans are challenging. I ain't gonna say difficult, they're a bit challenging, but, realizing the complexity of the loan and setting that, expectation. If you have anything to do in the contracting process of releasing the contingency release dates, always factor that in so that you can set an expectation with the borrower. All right, as I was saying before, you want to inform the borrower of document requirements depending on the loan type and employment. Tax returns and transcripts for self-employed borrowers. recent pay stubs. You want to make sure it's a full month, and VOEs. Bank statements when you're proving debts that are going to be paid, or bank statements are needed for assets. When you get those, please review for large deposits and payments to debts that do not appear on the credit report, because that will be added to the debt ratio. We had one creditor, it's like store credit, I think it's Curaçao. Yeah, Curacao, yeah, what she said. That company is notorious for not, reporting on a credit report, but if you see payments on your bank statement to that company, you know that payment is going to have to be added into the debt ratio. So just using that as an example to make sure that we're on top of all of those things. Inspecting what you expect. That's my catchphrase. How do I get rid of that? Something that popped up on the screen is trying to do that. All right, here we go. All right. You want to ask if any of the borrowers are veterans for all loans, because we all know the VA loans allow for extra opportunities and LTVs and flexibility, to be quite honest with you. And I underwrite VA loans in-house. If our borrowers are permanent residents or non-residents, please request current residency documents. Now, notice it says permanent residents as well. One of the main reasons is because I got tripped up a couple of weeks ago on a borrower who was a DACA. And Freddie Mac doesn't allow DACA loans, and our investors don't, but Fannie Mae and of course FHA and FHA does. So you want to go ahead and get that information up front when you're taking the application, and they say if they're a permanent resident, your next thing will say, okay, make sure that you put the residency documents to the side. Be sure to ask your borrowers about bankruptcies, divorces, child support, and documenting those when necessary with divorce decrees, bankruptcy schedules, court orders, and what have you. And you want to use things such as your separation agreements, the full bankruptcy schedules, and the court ordered child support agreements, as I just said. Now, a lot of this might be redundant, but a refresher's never hurt anyone. Request information on solar equipment if it exists, loan lease agreements, power purchase agreements, etc., because the debt ratio will be affected by the payment. Now, at what point do you know that there's solar? If your realtor brings you a contract and you haven't viewed the property that's going to be purchased, or if you're getting a refinance referral, go ahead and ask if they have solar so that we can get a jump on these. I have 2 loans now that I'm waiting for solar documents before I can give the clear to close. So we don't want you to have to wait until you're setting an expectation of closing, and I'm still waiting for documentation. Use established escrow companies so that they do not slow down the process. We've ran into that before, because a lot of times the smaller ones, obviously, they may become inundated with loans, or they just might not be as seasoned as some of your more established escrow companies. If you have any influence in that, make sure you refer them to one you trust. Make sure the borrower has the assets or an acceptable gift for the funds to close. We don't want to get to the tail end of it and again be worried about the final dollars to close. And that also includes your reserves when necessary. You want to ask key employment questions. Now, this is very important. Your time on the job, salary, hourly. You want to make sure what their average hours per week. The reason why, now this is really specific to your FHA loans, and we're doing a lot of them now, but it does also stand true for the other agencies. If the borrower's hours fluctuates to sometimes under 40 hours a week, even slightly, and I mean 39.79 hours, you should let them know that the hours worked for the previous year will be necessary for the income calculation. Now, how does that work? Now, that only comes into play if, in fact, the borrower has gotten an increase. So if they were making $15 an hour in 2022, they got a raise in 2023 to $16 an hour, but their hours fluctuate under 40 hours a week. What we want to know is how many hours they worked in 2022. Say they worked 2,050 hours. but we will be able to use the new rate of $16 an hour times the hours worked the previous year. So that's how we get the income calculation. That's, that's kind of hard to follow sometimes, but just keep in mind, if your borrower's hours fluctuate below 40 hours, even slightly, go ahead and plant that seed that you want to get something from the employer to identify the number of hours worked in the previous year. Now, of course, a lot of times, they'll say, well, we just use the work number and this sort of thing. Well, if we get the year-ending pay stubs and we know what their hourly rate was for the year, then with the VOE or the year-ending pay stubs, we can see how many straight hours they worked. So we would take the in total and divide that by the hourly rate to get the straight hours they worked, and we would hit that hourly rate. We would get those hours multiplied by the new hourly rate.
I have a question on that. So what if the borrower actually at the beginning of the year was a part-time employee, and probably at the end of the year, actually, he switched from a part-time employee to actual full-time? That means that if we average the hours, and then in fact, after he become a new full-time employee, he actually receive a pay increase, maybe the following month or whatever. So basically, we're gonna be way off when it comes to.
Yeah, you will be way off, but FHA's guidelines is clear in that you have to use 12 months of the previous 12 months. It doesn't allow me to prorate how many months it was. So in a case like that, if they've gone full-time, the key is we really want them to be working 40 hours a week. If in fact they were 11 months, they were part-time, and then they worked full-time for 11 months out of the year, I would try to make a case for it. The flexibility falls within the conventional ranks, not within the FHA loans. FHA, their guidelines are pretty cut in stone. They don't have any gray areas. So if it is a conventional loan, we'll get as close as we can. And I don't have a problem with contacting. I'm on the phone with Fannie, Freddie all the time, and I'll pitch a scenario because I'm a fight for every one of them. But I'm just letting you know that in setting the proper expectation for yourself, if in fact you're going FHA, that's going to be a hard sell. It's going to be a hard sell because, FHA's thought process is, well, what if they go back to part-time? Because they don't have 2 years history of working a full-time job. So that's how that mindset works. So they're always looking, FHA looks in the rear view. That's what I tell people a lot. They don't want to, it's not so much what you're doing now, it's what your history is, because to them, your history is what's going to predict the future. So just keep that in mind. But whenever possible, like I said, if we do fall short, I'm on the phone with them trying to find any angle to get this done. You can bet on that. Check for any garnishments or a tax levy, state or federal, on the pay stubs. You always want to check for those because a lot of times they're hidden in all of the deductions with your 401ks and all of that, and especially when they work for government agencies like police officers and city of LA. Oh yeah, the city of LA, or like nurses and whatnot, in the medical field where the pay stubs are pretty involved. You just gotta take a look and see if you see that. Now, of course, your operations partner is trained to pick that up, as am I. But again, the title of this is for you to inspect what you expect, because I want you guys to be as strong and armed with all the tools to make the best decisions. You want to document any job gaps and time off. Now, FHA says anything over like 6 months or so of a job gap. But I'm encouraging you that if you have a job gap of over 30 days, let's find out what the deal is. Let's document that. That way, that comes from my mentality. If you don't start none, it won't be none. Let's find out initially. If you have any gaps in job, paid or unpaid, let's find out what they were so that we can document them accordingly. When using retirement funds for calculating funds for closing our reserves, calculate 60% of the balance less any outstanding loans. How are you going to know it's for a 401k loan before you get the documents? Well, those are usually on the pay stubs as well. It'll tell you they're taking out $10 a pay period for 401k and $15 for the 401k loan. Then you know that you have a 401k loan that you gotta deal with. So if you're looking at a face value of 100,000, you say, okay, well, I got 60,000 to work with. Yeah, you might not. So you want to make sure that you factor that in, and keep in mind that reserves often offset other risk players in AUS and for Fannie and Freddie. So, you know, you have a risk factor with short time on the job, but you have 15 months of reserves, that's going to factor in. So, you know, it's not just if you need it for closing. Anytime that you can add reserves to a marginal loan, it's going to help you. Ask questions about the property, specifically if there's any converted living spaces, garages, and ADUs primarily, as there are specific guidelines for all agencies, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, and VA, as it pertains to ADUs and conversions. Any disputes on credit, they must be lifted and credit reran, as disputes are not included in the score. And it will cause for a manual downgrade on FHA loan. And we do not, nor any of our investors, do manual conventional loans. So if you see the credit report, or if your operational partner tells you that there's some disputes on credit, know that they have to get lifted. You know, whether that requires us paying them, because, you know, a lot of times somebody disputes something, it's dormant on the credit report. They're not talking to me, I'm not talking to them. Well, you want to get a loan, it's going to have to be addressed, unfortunately. The contract. I know I'm going through this pretty fast, but again, you guys get a copy of this. And if any of this brings about questions, please just hit me with the question and I will address it directly. Make sure they're always fully executed with all addendums, of course. You want to verify that the seller is the vested owner. If it's in a trust or LLC, go ahead and provide proof that that seller has the authority to sell, whether it be a trust certificate or I call it the LLC docs, which, you know, gives you who the list of officers are in the LLC who has the authority to sell it. A lot of times we're doing loans where there's a builder and and it's the builder's company. You just need to make sure that that person who's signing that contract on behalf of the seller has that authority, and we got documented authority to sell. They can tell us, oh, I can sell this, but we have to have it documented. Make sure that any item left behind, appliances, patio furniture, etc., is added to the contract with the value or specific information that there's no value added for the item. So, you know, there is a schedule on every contract where you can, you know, check all the things that's being left in. You always see bathroom mirrors. A lot of times it'll be the stove, sometimes the refrigerator. But anything, you keep in mind that anything that's left in the home, it has to be identified. Really and truly, that's really found and identified on the appraisal, because you're, you know, again, as the loan professional here, you don't always go out and inspect the property, of course, so you won't know. But just keep in mind that that is something that we're going to have to address. And sometimes it'll cause you to have to get an addendum to do that. And we all know that realtors are not always the easiest people to communicate with. Of course, you want to make sure it's dated within 30 days of the expected closing date. And, you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, loans might drag on a little bit longer, but just anticipate that we will need an extension. All right, you want to verify the EMD amount and if it can be sourced. Because again, of course, the underlying thing that we're trying to determine is make sure they're not getting a loan to get a loan. So verify that that EMD can be sourced. And if not, if you can back it out and the loan still works with the cash to close. You want to validate all seller concessions, because again, sometimes it changes with addendums. Starts at $10,000 and then the addendum, okay, I'll pay for this, but I'm taking my concession down to $5,000, or, you know, because you got to pay, you pay for it and I'll concede you. Whatever the case may be, you do want to make sure you know that, because again, that parlays into your cash for close. Sections listing all agents and escrow information with the contact information completed. I just had a situation where I had to go through contract and get for one of our sales partners the listing agent's information, because she was off site and she needed to contact the listing agent. that information is always viable. So let's make sure that, when you look at the contract, just mental note, make sure that we have the contact information on there. Validate that the owner or seller is vested for a minimum of 90 days. That's an agency guideline that we really want to make sure of. When do you really know that? Really not until the title. And they, and if it's a new build, then the developer would have been entitled since he bought the land. So it's usually within a 90-day period that they've invested. But you just want to make sure that you know that, because that's going to come up in the underwriting review.
That will be that guideline will apply on into FHA, correct?
Oh, excuse me?
The 90-day waiting period that will apply on into FHA, correct?
Yeah, it applies to FHA.
On the conventional, we're exclude that one, correct?
I wouldn't say excluded. I'll find out. I know it does have a minimum vesting period for flips. So that's based on the flip rule. That's some trailing information I'll give for you guys, just so that, I can guess, but I want to make sure that that we cover the flip rule for all agencies, but that's definitely for FHA.
Thank you.
Speaking of, let's look at some FHA loan things. All right, this is huge. If the borrower or spouse has an I-10, please verify that up front. Is there additional steps required? We have to run credit on the I-10 number. We have to run it with zeros. We have to run it based on addresses. It's some steps that are involved. And some lenders have some agencies have specific guidelines. But FHA do a loan with an I-10, one of the borrowers. We just have to make sure that we do all of this, that diligence right there. Overtime and bonus is calculated by averaging the previous 2 years. The amounts are not, the year-to-date amount is not considered. Remember me saying a minute ago, FHA looks in the rear view, not going forward. So for overtime, bonus, anything other than your base income, you're gonna, base income includes your holiday, sick, and vacation, of course. But anything other, whether it's bonuses, OT, different categories, spliffs, incentives, they're looking at a 2-year average in order to use that for your debt ratio. Anything less than 4 hours, this is back to what I was saying before, anything less than 40 hours on a full-time borrower is considered as fluctuating income in FHA guidelines. So the previous 2 years are used for the calculation, like I said, unless there's a documented increase. And that's why I put it in capital. If so, we need the amount of hours worked for the previous year. The new hourly rate will be multiplied by the new hourly rate is a derivative that is multiplied times times the hours worked. And 1/12 of that is used for the debt ratio.
Can I ask a question now that we touched the topic? And this is in a scenario. For instance, I have this borrower, he works as an electrician, correct? He's been working for the same company for over 7-8 years now. He works only 40 hours, but recently, and he didn't work no overtime in the past. However, recently, within the last 2 months, they decided to go 4-10. So basically they work 10 hours a day for 4 days, but the company decided to pay the additional 2 hours a day as overtime. So basically on the pay stub is going to show 32 hours as a regular base pay and 8 hours as overtime. I cannot use the overtime, but it's actually clear that he's working his 40 hours.
Right. Okay. So in a case like that, we would have to get documentation or information from the employer to identify exactly what you said, and then the base rate will be charged. You can get the base rate for those extra hours leading up to the 40 hours. If that's how they do it, they do 4-10s, and because anything over 8 hours in a day is considered overtime.
Right.
But for calculation purposes, you would have to use it as straight time. Oh, especially if they just went that route. Now, if you've been working for a couple of years, we use that, and then 2 years of the average of what's considered the overtime. But in a case like that, it has to be identified, because not all employers do over 8 as overtime.
Right.
So in that case, he would get the 40 hours, but he would be at the base rate. Okay. If there is a non-borrowing spouse, in case you didn't know, the debts from that credit report are added to the debt ratio. So a lot of times that surprises people. All properties must meet HUD's minimum property requirements as it pertains to the condition of the home, and the appraiser must specifically state this in the report. Since we do not hold repair escrows, if there are any known issues with the subject property, please communicate that. They must be remedied prior to approval. Okay, so anytime that if it comes through subject to, just know that we're gonna have to have a 1004D showing, which is the reinspection report showing that it has been remedied prior to approval. I don't like moving that stuff to prior to funding unless it's minor, because I have had them because light switches need to be installed on a new construction, or at the time of the photo, they hadn't put all the light fixtures in. So, in that case, if it's something that, we can reasonably ascertain that it has been done and the reinspection is a time issue, I am flexible with that. But that request has to come from operations management to me. That's not something that, one of our operational partners or processors come, can we just move that? I want to make sure that that their management is aware of that, because if we don't get it, then it's going to be a problem with funding that loan. Back to converted living spaces, they have to be identified and permitted when necessary. Please update your operations partner as soon as you are aware so we can begin addressing it. FHA guidelines on this are not very flexible, so as soon as we know about it, we will make sure to make that proper expectations are set. So, and I know the next one is, the main one is really garage photos. You got to review the garage photos. If you get when you get the appraisal, we're going to see it at the same time, but part of inspecting what you expect mentality, review the garage photos for conversions, because if the appraisal says that the property has a garage and does not mention it, it will cause problems with getting that loan insured. Now, on the appraisal grid, it might show it'll say 2 GA or 2 DW. It say that means a 2-car garage and a driveway. So they're giving a value for it being a garage where vehicles can be stored, not just because it's a garage structure. I ran into this specific instance with LA County, and their rule is if it says that it has a 2-car garage, then it has to have one. So that means now, again, it doesn't mean that you got to go taking everything out. Really and truly, you want to make sure that the garage door opens up and that a car can go in there. You can move all the couches to the side or whatever, but if they converted it to full-on living space, then we need to address that and make sure. It's fine to do. I'm not saying that it's an illegal process, but we want to know as ahead of time so that it can be conditioned properly and you don't run into no last minute obstacles. Okay, also pay extra attention, and I had mentioned this earlier. You want to pay extra attention to bank statements, but not just the deposits, but for the recurring payments that are not included in debt ratio on the credit report. FHA is keen. They have specific eyes set on the bank statements to look for this. Not looking at utility payments or anything like that, but for loans, store credit, etc. I had to reiterate that here because that has come up, quite a few times at the final, even at the conditional review, where there are payments that we didn't factor in the debt ratio. Large percentage of time, the DTI is good, we can put a payment in there. But it has held us up on a couple of things where the borrower had to pay it off, and then we had to have proof paid so we can exclude it for the debt rate from the debt ratio, or we'd have to get the loan agreements. So keep in mind that, especially on FHA loans, when they have a specific eye towards these things. This is just one statement for me that loans can be challenging, and maintaining transparency is very important. And any of you guys who've ever worked with me know that I'm going to be as transparent as I can. I'm very experienced and I have a lot of knowledge on overcoming obstacles and roadblocks. So when you're faced with something that you feel may change or affect the underwriting decision, reach out to your contact at iCore. When I say contact, I mean, your processor. Heck, Can be Darshan, David, Tanya, anybody, and have them discuss it with me. Or you can reach out to me. You can reach out to me, and if there's a way to make it work, I'm gonna find it. Because our goal is not only to close that loan, but to be your lending partner and close all of your loans.
Woot, woot.
Uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
sorry about that. I have a problem
Why
looking,
you-
I have a problem looking at myself. Let me go back with you. Okay, we'll stay right there. But anyway, so I went through that, in normal speed, because I didn't think that anything that I said there is anything surprising to you. But it's very, very important to factor these things in subliminally when you're sizing it up, because I know from, originating experience, if I tell a borrower that it's going to take me 2 weeks to close your loan, and it takes me 3 weeks, then I've reduced my ability to get referrals from that borrower. If I tell your borrower it's going to take me 4 weeks to close it, and I close it in 3, I'm God. They're going to send me, their aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. So, it's very important to me to underwrite with a sales mentality so that I'm working as your partner and not as just the person who, as the gatekeeper. Because again, I work through all types of obstacles, and I'm on the scenario desk. So anytime that I can impart any knowledge and stuff there, I will. So be sure you're using that scenario desk if you haven't been, because Tanya, David, and I, we put our heads together on a lot of those just to make sure that they work. Very, very important. We realize that every loan is important. And if you guys originated with this stuff in mind, then every loan has a chance to close. So I want you to be able to close it, to originate it with confidence, and so that you can turn it over to us and move on to the next loan. Go ahead.
Okay, yesterday I had a meeting with a couple that the husband is the only
Breadwinner?
one that works, and he works in construction. In 2020, last year, 2022, he was off work for 3 months because he went to Mexico to visit a family who was ill. When he came back, he talked to the employer like, okay, I'm back. They said, well, it's a little slow. Why don't you come back a little later? So he was off work about 3 months.
Or an additional 3 months.
No, there's overall 3 months.
All right.
He was off work 3 months. So in 2021, his income was like 102, and in 2022 was 70,000. Now it's back to maybe making about like 9. How would you see that on an FHA?
Oh, on the FHA, really, if there's a fluctuation or something like that, we would take into consideration the previous year. But I have had the ability to, I don't like to use the term prorate, but he was off for 3 months, so that's 9, averaging, what's 9, 20, 21 months, and by, adding it together and averaging by 21. But the amount of time that he was off divided by his earnings should be on par with monthly earnings the previous year.
And that's basically what I told him. I said, look, worst case, they're gonna want to average 2021, 22, and year to date. Take all that into account. Say best case scenario, instead of saying you only work 12 months in 2022, they're just gonna look at 9.
Well,
If it's aligning to
yeah,
what you-
I mean, I'm telling you, the best thing to do, the thing that would cause the least amount of problems is if, even that it would work based on the reduced amount. If we took that 70,000 divided it by 12, that's, best case scenario. If in fact it is short and it is documented, then I have a specific case where the borrower was out 4 months because she was ill, and we got all of that documentation. So I had to take those 8 months divided by what she earned, and that needed to be at or above the average of 12 months of the previous year. So I'm looking to make sure there wasn't any decrease in earnings. If there is a decrease in earnings, I got to use a lower amount.
Oh, get the 70,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's a decrease in earning by doing that prorated calculation, if there's a decrease in earnings, I'm going to have to do it, because again, because of it being construction, it's a fluctuating thing.
Mhm.
So year to date really isn't going, the only thing year to date is going to show me is that they're back to work full time, not in the numbers calculation, but in the ability to, to use that income going forward. But yeah, I have, like I said, I have a specific case with information directly from one of the chief underwriters from FHA that allowed me to do a prorated calculation for qualification purposes, not for final calculation.
I have a few questions in regards to underwriting conditions after the loan has been approved. I know for like some of the conditions can be moved forward prior to funding, especially, but with the exception when it comes to income and assets, right? It's
Correct.
gonna be moved to very close. I have a scenario where actually we get the verification of employment through their work number. For some reason, it was something off, very, very small because the company decided to switch names. That has been corrected. Then there was another underwriter. But here the key is actually both of the borrowers, they make a lot of overtime. But the underwriter make a comment like to verify from the employer the overtime to be continued. However, I can see that on a perspective where if the overtime is declining, I think the underwriter wants to make sure that the income will continue. But if the overtime is increasing, and it was actually reason, the overtime was increasing, but they still request for this.
That is a normal request. Anytime it's anything other than base income, the probability of continuance should always be a question. Because now the work number, it doesn't do that, but on a handwritten DOE, I believe it's box 14, it says, is it likely to continue? If there is a fluctuation, to your point, going down, especially. Now, we run into that problem a lot in the first quarter of the year because we had one just a couple of weeks ago where the overtime, they only wanted to use that smaller year-to-date amount when in fact the guy is in construction and the overtime comes in the warmer months. So, Hayel was very instrumental in outside of me and working over there with the other operational partners, said, look, he's in construction. Have the employer let us know that his overtime is increased during the summer months so that it's going to be on par with what he has made before. So it does in a lot of cases, if there's any type of congruence or let's just say, indecision whether or not given the direction of the overtime, that is a normal condition to verify that it is going to continue.
And the reason I brought it up is because that condition, I mean, we got the verification of employment through the work number, but if I would need since the beginning, that actually will be a questions for the underwriter to, especially when it comes to that, I would request my verifications since the beginning of the process, not to wait until the last minute, because now some employers are really
of course,
fast on providing that information. Some of them
won't because they use a work number. Some of them won't, and those are the times when a lot of times the borrower's got to get involved, go to their supervisor or someone and ask. But in a case like that, if you got that. When you get if you got the BOE, did you see the BOE or went straight to your processor, right?
I saw it a couple of days later, but I saw that the overtime was increasing, so I didn't even bother myself to request for regular verification of employment and to actually get back to us. I mean, all right, we need, the underwriter is questioning, or they need remarks from the employer for the LT to be continued. And now the employer is not really incorporating. So basically now we're like out of contract and stuff like that. And my question is that something that it should request all the time when I see overtime, because I don't want to go through the same issue?
No, I mean, honestly, based on your experience, I would say yes. If you see, if overtime, especially if there's any fluctuation in it, then I would, the continuance of it is important. So I don't, I do use, a common sense approach in that if I see it is increasing and I've got year-to-date overtime, my year-to-date overtime is on par or better than what the previous was, then, most of the times I'm going to push for that. Now, post-closing, the investor may still require it and, it becomes a post-closing condition, but I can usually, provide a memo to overcome that. I do take it into consideration, but it just depends, man, and that underwriter has every right to request that because that is a normal requirement. Yeah, so, once bitten, twice shy, I'll probably be like, you know what, I ain't gonna let this happen to me again. But it's not always necessary, and as with anything, especially with you being in here, I sit right over there, man, bring it to me, let's chop it up, and if I can figure out a way to not do that, then by all means, I am, even if it's an external file that's going non-delegated, underwriting is underwriting, and if I can put a case together for you, I'm definitely gonna do that, and I have done that.
Oh, thank you, we appreciate it. Yeah, for me, was like, all right, let me just make sure that there's gonna be always a case so that we can verify with the employer, like the verification. Or actually, let me ask you this question as well, because this has to do with almost the same file. At what point, you decided to accept a process or cert instead for waiting for the actually verification of employment? That was another one because the employer switched names from ABC company to DP whatever company. So I think the project was able to get in hold of the HR and verbally they decided, yes, we switched from company to company, but then it seems like they want something in writing.
Yeah.
At what point do you say like, I want to use a process or cert?
I don't, honestly, in my career here at iCore, I have probably seen 1 or 2 processor certifications. In cases like that with changing names, the operations partners here, they'll do, Google search 401 searches to find that, if it's switched names or switched payroll companies, that's happened a lot as well. But again, if I could tie it together, okay, a process certification showing what they're using to tie it together, then a case can be made. So, a lot of times, if in fact, one company, buy out another company or something like that, if you can put a case together, it's not necessarily the cert. The cert is just tying it together. It's a document that cert is supporting is what's most important. So in what case do I use a process of cert? If you're tying it together and it's a roadmap. But in lieu of, no, I wouldn't be able to just do that. If you don't have any documents, but you say that this company is, these are the same companies. It's not that I don't believe you, but it's not what I believe is what I can prove. So if you're using a process of cert to tie together some documents, by all means, and they don't have to fit all together. If your process of cert, which I'll help you write as well, I can do those pretty good too. If it doesn't have to tie exactly together, but if it's reasonable to ascertain, then I would do that, but not as a standalone.
Okay, yeah, because that case it was in the W2 they match and the address and the pay stub they match that those two companies.
Yeah, that's easy. I wouldn't call that a process of cert, that's a letter of explanation.
And actually I request that because that's actually one of my conditions. But it seems like the underwriter they don't want to accept it. But I asked the processing team, hey, can we just can this condition be acceptable with the process of cert? And they got back to me like now they actually are asking for the written verification.
Okay, so
that kind of
and this is for the address or for the income?
No, for the switch of names of the companies.
But the names on the pay stub, the addresses on the pay stub for the company is the same.
They match.
Man, please, no, we can, that can be escalated because, it's in that case, it's an explanation. It's not a certification. It's showing, it's a roadmap. You can see the address is 123 Main Street for King Enterprises and it's, 123 Main Street for Hiel Incorporated. That these are the same companies and what King bought Hiel, it wasn't the other way around. But you can see that it's the same company. So that's a roadmap, and I use that all the time.
Okay, yeah, that was the only question that I had because they couldn't accept it. I was like, let me ask actually at what point they decide not to use.
Well, again, man, an underwriter is an individual, and a lot of times, even with FHA loans, especially with investor loans, when they put post-closing conditions and whatnot, that condition is based on that underwriter's interpretation. Now, if that underwriter's interpretation is based on the guideline that I interpreted differently, then I'm going to rebut it. So it's not that I don't trust, but if I see it one way, you see it the other way, then I want to make sure you're clear on how I see it. And a lot of times, we've been quite successful in getting and clearing those types of things, whether it be post-closing conditions or in the case of a non-delegated file, when we've been hit with a condition that we don't necessarily agree with. And I
Okay.
put a case together. I got a whole list of underwriting memos that I've done, in my career with iCore to make sure that, because it's an individual. It's an individual. Some investors are QCing every one of our files. So what happens inevitably when the market started getting downturning and a lot of layoffs, a lot of those underwriters who were in production moved into QC, and they don't have a lot of experience in QC and files, so they're just going based on their underwriting knowledge on how they would underwrite the file, not how it should be done. So that's just the nature that we live in. But again, if a processor's cert is more of a letter of explanation and tie the dot, to connect them, give them a roadmap, we should be good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Does anybody on Zoom have a question or a short scenario they want to discuss with Darryl? We have 10 minutes. Don't be shy.
All right, well, if not, you can always call me or reach out to me directly. We'll get you a copy of this deck as well to make sure that you can that you can have that as a point of reference. And if it stimulates any questions or whatnot, hey, let me know. I'm going to send out another little FAQ. I've got a series of 3, and they're really born from purchase loans. And I say it's a series of 3 because I never like to send out long memos because, hell, I don't like reading them myself. So, but no, I just want to, stimulate, give you guys, any unfair advantage I can from an underwriting perspective to get the loans in, and let's get them closed. We have a great success rate of getting loans through the system. I know that I turn them around, quickly, not inefficiently, but I mean, when I say quickly, not just rushing, but I'm very efficient in what I do. Not perfect, but I do my best. But definitely a team player, and with years of originating experience, I know the challenges you guys face, especially in a tough market like this. So anything I can do to give you an unfair advantage, whether it's a scenario or answering questions, or if you disagree with a condition, I mean, I'm not mad at you. Let's talk about it. I would much rather us be on the same page than you just accepting what I say at face value if you disagree with it. I ain't gonna say I'm gonna change it, but I would welcome the conversation and to give you my point of view.
Does anybody have any questions, or you guys are good?
I'm good.
All right, well, it's Carmen. Well, hi, Carmen. Well, thank you guys. If you have any, like I said,
Dominic, no questions?
oh, Dominic, is he on here?
Yeah.
All right, guys, so it's always great talking to you individually and now as a group. If you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate. Let's do this together and successfully. And I'm definitely your advocate in this thing, not just to protect the gate, but I want to open up that so that you can bring in all the great loans you can. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.